Look around. Birth rates are below replacement in virtually every developed country. Marriage is collapsing. Divorces are skyrocketing. The age of first marriage keeps rising. Millions of people will never marry at all. This is not people choosing solitude. This is the systematic destruction of the conditions under which stable families form. Women are on antidepressants at historically unprecedented rates. Despite 50 years of being told that career and independence would deliver happiness, women report lower life satisfaction today than at any point in recorded modern history. Those who followed the script most faithfully, career first, family later, are arriving at their late 30s and 40s in loneliness, anxiety, and purposelessness. Men have disengaged, mass sexlessness, withdrawal from dating, education, and civic life, direct responses to a culture that treats men as presumed guilty, economically disposable, and emotionally irrelevant. Young men increasingly see no path to dignity or purpose. Male suicide rates exceed female rates in every Western country. A generation of men with no stake in the future is a civilization that has no future. Men and women are more hostile to each other than ever before. Hookup culture and the destruction of courtship have left a generation without the psychological tools for commitment or loyalty. Two sexes, built by millions of years of evolution to pair bond and build families, have been culturally engineered into mutual contempt. And children are now the direct target. An ideology documented in this film is currently being administered in schools, clinics, and hospitals. Minors are being chemically sterilized and surgically altered before they can vote, drive, or sign a contract. The damage is frequently irreversible. The detransitioner numbers are growing. This did not happen by accident. It was built, idea by idea, book by book, institution by institution. Specific individuals constructed this. They inserted it into academia, into law, into media, into culture, into the minds of children. And the damage is now civilizational and measurable. This documentary is about those individuals. Many of them were miserable, mentally ill, isolated. Many of them died alone. They built an ideology out of their own pathology, and then exported that pathology to millions, then billions of women. The result speaks for itself. A world without love, without family, and without meaning. Society is collapsing. Here is why. The dark truth. Valerie Solanas published the SCUM manifesto in 1967, calling for overthrowing the government and the outright genocide of all men. She insisted it was dead serious, not satire. In 1968, she walked into Andy Warhol's studio with a gun and shot him 3 times in a calculated attempt to murder him. Warhol survived, but never fully recovered. Solanas was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sentenced to 3 years in prison. The rest of her life was a study in the exact misery her ideology produces. She cycled between mental hospitals, worked as a prostitute, ate from dumpsters, dug a fork into her own scab-filled arms, and was found decomposing alone in a San Francisco hotel room in 1988. What the feminist movement did with this? Now President T. Grace Atkinson called her the first outstanding champion of women's rights, and a heroine of the feminist movement. Her manifesto became obligatory reading for feminists. It is still sold today by Penguin Random House. For the past 25 years, many other feminists have also referred to her as a hero, and continue to do so to this day.
At age 25, Shulamith Firestone published The Dialectic of Sex, 1970, calling for the complete abolition of the biological family, the replacement of natural pregnancy with artificial reproduction, and the elimination of the distinction between childhood and adulthood. She founded multiple feminist organizations and is considered a core architect of second-wave ideology. She battled schizophrenia for decades. Her own friends described her as mentally ill. The medications took away her talent and thoughts. She died alone in her New York apartment. Her body was not discovered for several days. The woman who told a generation that family was a prison died without one. Undiscovered, unmissed.
Kate Millett's Sexual Politics, 1970, is the book that defined the entire framework. Every male-female relationship, sexual, domestic, professional, cultural, is fundamentally an exercise in patriarchal power and domination. This framing became the ideological core of everything that followed. She was institutionalized for bipolar disorder. Former members of her commune described her as psychologically domineering and controlling. The woman who declared all relationships between men and women are about power ran her own relationships with an iron fist. She handed an entire generation of women the lens to see every man in their lives as an oppressor. Andrea Dworkin argued that heterosexual penetration is inherently an act of male violence, that marriage is legalized prostitution, that male sexuality itself is the engine of female oppression. She spent her career framing normal male sexuality as predatory by definition. Her ideological fingerprints are on campus rape culture hysteria, believe all women with no due process, the destruction of presumption of innocence for men accused of sexual misconduct, and the entire toxic masculinity framework now enforced in schools and workplaces. Every man falsely accused on a university campus owes his predicament partly to her.
Michel Foucault is the philosophical engine that the entire ideology runs on. His core thesis, that all social categories, including gender, sanity, sexuality, and normalcy, are not real, but constructed by those in power to control populations, is the intellectual foundation of feminism as we know it today. In his framework, all norms are instruments of domination. Medicine, psychiatry, law, the family, all tools of oppression. The logical endpoint? Nothing is inherently normal, deviant, healthy, or pathological. Everything is just power. Every argument used to delegitimize biology, the family, and social norms runs directly through him. His books are mandatory reading in every gender studies, sociology, and humanities program in the Western world. He also lived his philosophy to its darkest conclusion. He was personally and deeply involved in the S&M subculture of the 1970s and publicly defended sadomasochism as political liberation. His biographer, James Miller, documented him joining orgies of torture, trembling with the most exquisite agonies, and academics celebrated this as courageous philosophy. On children, in 1977, he signed a petition to the French National Assembly calling for the decriminalization of all consensual sexual relations between adults and children. He told his biographer that pederasty was the only truly romantic form of love, and that dying for the love of boys was the most beautiful thing imaginable. He died of AIDS in 1984. The man whose ideas now run through every feminist studies program, diversity training, and gender clinic worldwide, defended sadism, signed a petition decriminalizing consensual sexual relations between adults and children, and died of AIDS.
Without Simone de Beauvoir, there is no feminist ideology as we know it. Her The Second Sex, 1949, introduced the claim that one is not born a woman, but becomes one, the philosophical seed from which all gender constructivism grew. She declared marriage a dangerous institution, called motherhood a form of oppression, and spent her life presenting her own childless, unmarried existence as the model for liberated womanhood. Behind the public image of women's liberator was a predator. She groomed at least 3 teenage girls, her own students, and had sexual relationships with them. She was dismissed from her teaching position as a direct result. In 1977, de Beauvoir and Foucault jointly signed a public petition in Le Monde, calling for the legalization of sexual relations between adults and children, arguing that child protection laws should be repealed entirely. The philosophical mother of all feminist ideology groomed teenage girls, had sexual relationships with her own students, and signed a petition decriminalizing consensual sexual relations between adults and children.
Judith Butler's Gender Trouble, 1990, launched the entire gender ideology industry. Her central claim? Gender is not biological essence. It is performative, a series of repeated acts with no grounding in physical reality. Biological sex itself is a social construct. This one idea, built directly on Foucault's philosophical framework, is the intellectual origin of gender ideology being taught to children in elementary schools, medical transitions for minors, and the complete destabilization of sexual identity in an entire generation. She is still active. Her ideas now run through diversity training programs, gender clinics, and school board policies across the Western world. Butler says biological sex isn't real. Doctors are now using that idea to sterilize children who cannot consent.
The birth rate collapse is not an accident of economics or modernity. It is the direct result of telling women for 50 years that motherhood is oppression, that the family is a prison, that children are a burden, and that a woman's worth is measured by her career and independence. De Beauvoir planted the seed. Firestone, Millet, and Dworkin watered it. Butler and Foucault provided the intellectual justification. The institutions enforced it. And now our society is collapsing, and in the not-so-distant future, our civilization will die. The antidepressant epidemic is not an accident. Women were sold a life script. Career over family, independence over connection, self-actualization over sacrifice, and then left to discover in their 30s and 40s that it produced exactly the isolation and purposelessness it promised to cure. The happiness research is unambiguous. Women report lower life satisfaction today than ever before in human history. Male withdrawal is not pathology. It is a rational response to a culture that has criminalized male sexuality, presumed male guilt, stripped men of legal protections, and offered them nothing in return for commitment and sacrifice. Men going their own way, men becoming isolated, men losing meaning. This is the logical consequence of a society that spent 50 years treating men as the problem. The incompatibility of men and women is not natural. It was engineered by people who believed the destruction of the heterosexual family was a political necessity, who reframed every act of love between men and women as an act of power and domination, and who spent decades teaching an entire civilization to see the opposite sex as the enemy. Our society didn't decay by accident. It was built on the ideology of sick minds. And now it rots.